January 21st, 2026. I'd like to start this video with some good news. And let's start with the weather forecast. So, look what we have here. Kyiv, and today it's -7, feels like -3, and then it's going to warm up. No, spring is still a long way off, of course. But, in general, this means that we've survived the most critical moment, during the attacks on our energy infrastructure. It was tough and it will be tougher, but the majority of us won't freeze. And I think that's great news. This means that with these, methods of terror and Cold War against the Russian, what should we call them, occupiers, well, you can add your opinion about ordinary Russians in the comments. Well, basically, their plan failed, and that's important in this case. They wanted to break through the rear, but something went wrong. Speaking of good news, we're continuing our fundraising for 4 brigades. These are drone components. The fundraising is just a cute name. It's to help the drones fly, to help solve the problem with a Russian soldier's leg. I donated $1,000. That's what you sent me on PayPal. It's already in the bank, and in 2 days, we've closed a gigantic collection for the 3rd, and that's great. Now let's talk about what's coming our way. We don't always shoot everything down, although, if you look at the statistics, the effectiveness of Ukrainian air defense systems, reinforced by our Western partners, is actually around 90%. When I think about what would have happened if we hadn't received such support, no, I know perfectly well that it could have been better. It gets even colder. And so, spring has come. So, I really enjoyed last night. I was streaming with Yuri Rashkin at this time yesterday, and Russia was falling. Krasnodar cry. Oral. Well, Oral. We, as I understand it, basically, are constantly undergoing, testing of the capabilities of our weapons there. And, of course, Belgorod. Citizen correspondents are reporting the following. A
missile just flew right in front of our face. Allahu Akbar.
Inshallah.
Oh, it hit residential buildings. Here's the trace right over our head.
If you, like me, believe that a missile should fly not in front of our face, but into our face, yes. There is an expression to land on our face, and here the missile should land on our face. If you agree with this thesis, subscribe to my YouTube channel. We call things by their proper names. This happened near Krasnodar, and, by the way, the missile wasn't ours. Something short-circuited in the air defense missile, like in Putin's head. And it decided to visit this little house. Where is it? There it is, this beautiful little house. Well, nothing special happens in Russia, really. A few cars burned, there are injuries, no one died. Well, what I'd like to say, Goida, is that we need to continue in this direction, and then, sooner or later, we'll convince them that fighting against Ukraine is painful. It has to be more painful. I understand perfectly well that the rules are being violated, because Moscow's thermal power plants need to be attacked. Well, I believe that Moscow, as a separatist city, should suffer first. Well, we're proceeding from what we have now, and our technological solutions are developing and expanding, and the geography of the strikes speaks for itself. I'm very pleased that this little hut I just showed you, they're reporting that a flamingo flew into a residential building in Krasnodar. It wasn't a flamingo. I hope there will be flamingos too. But they're gradually starting to get afraid, and that's absolutely right. This is what will help with denazification, the desire not to freeze. In this regard, I'm documenting a truly astonishing picture. The entire Russian propaganda team has practically forgotten about Ukraine. They've stopped caring about it altogether. Of course, the fighting is still going strong. Well, there's no Putin in uniform. Putin isn't even around, and Putin isn't making any political statements right now. Well, maybe that's because Putin simply has nothing to say, most likely. Well, listen, no one's in danger. He's sitting in a bunker somewhere, talking to Gerasimov, and he's doing a moo-moo. The official propagandists for lumpen have taken a very interesting, position, like, we, Russia, together with Trump, yeah, some kind of holy alliance, a fascist Reich, and, the United States. I want to say right away that this licking of the whistle is, of course, interesting to watch. Well, it's a real humiliation. They're actually humiliating themselves in front of the American president. But if you look into it, it won't help them. Donald Trump, yes, he's not pro-Ukrainian, but he's definitely not pro-Russian. And we'll document this now. Of course, everyone's waiting for the American president's speech in Davos. He had some adventures when he went to Europe. His plane broke down, but he hopped on another one and apparently made it. What could happen then? Well, there are two options. Either he'll seek some kind of compromise solution, meaning Greenland is Denmark, Crimea is Ukraine, or he'll sever relations with all the ensuing consequences. And it's entirely possible that at some point even the Europeans will thank Trump for galvanizing them in this way, because Europe will arm itself, militarize itself, and Ukraine will be Europe. Let's figure this out. Support our fundraising for 4 brigades. You can see the QR code details on the screens in the description. Glory to the armed forces and other defense links, who will sooner or later finish off the Russian vermin. How ambiguous that sounded. Oh well. Nederland has turned Europe into a laughing stock. Not only that, Trump has even said it directly. Russia is not the enemy. The European Union is. Quote. Trump even stated this in his national strategy. What's the point of Trump fighting for Ukraine? What does he have to gain from it? It's just that there are no American troops there. You've been fighting American mercenaries for 4 years, I think, and then this change. One moment there were troops, the next, they're gone. Fight for Europe, and Ukraine is Europe. This is the story of geopolitical fault lines. And in fact, there are too many people in the United States who think the American president is acting crazy right now, and he, too, will be corrected. I'm even wondering about Trump's speech in Davos. It could turn out that he'll back down again. Regarding the EU being the enemy, well, firstly, Trump didn't say that. Yes, he reposted some crazy text about how the enemy isn't Russia or China, but NATO and the UN. Well, talking about the UN is pointless. It's a dead organization with good salaries. But NATO is the enemy. Well, Donald, figure it out. But what's that? It's soft and a battery. That's how it looks from the outside, because you want to grab Greenland so that Russia and China don't grab it. And if they're not your enemies, then they definitely won't grab it. Logical. At first glance, it seems logical, but what's going on in the red head, it's not entirely clear yet. We need to study this issue and support the defense forces. There's no reputational hit for Trump. He keeps saying, European war. If you want weapons, buy them. Don't make your own, buy American ones. Well, it will be the other way around, there will be militarization. Yes, indeed, why send gas to American factories when you can use your own European industrial capacity? What's really interesting about this idiot is, look at the intensity with which he kisses Donald Trump's ass. Well, basically, Solovyov is the kind of guy who licks whatever he's told. He needs to lick this or that, his ass. And if he gets an order, he'll lie down before hanging on it. Well, I'm already picturing this for the future. But pay attention, they're selling the Russian lumpen, the story of this geopolitical rift between the US and Europe. I just want to say, if the Americans, and they continue to do so, sell weapons to Europe, do you know what happens to these weapons next? These weapons solve the problem with the Russian soldier's leg. Idiot, why aren't you telling me this? This is an important detail. In general, our whole life is based on nuances. And I'll take Greenland for you. Why the hell do we need Ukraine if we can have Greenland? Greenland can be annexed. Ukraine can't. We need to constantly invest in Ukraine. Greenland isn't needed. There are tens of millions of people in Ukraine, who will then need to be fed and watered, businesses created for them, and these territories demanded. Yes, that's exactly what the restoration of Ukraine will look like. And the comparison itself is very strange. That is, they position it as if we can exchange Ukraine for Greenland. Do you understand what our Russian are talking about? Trump doesn't have Greenland, so I won't be leaving my toga. And Trump doesn't have Ukraine, and Putin doesn't have Ukraine either. And he won't be here either. I'm absolutely sure of that. True, he's
rebuilding the national economy for nothing. You have Greenland right next to you, which has gigantic natural resources and a population of less than 50,000, maybe 60,000. But now another 100,000 Ukrainians will come. It's not about anything.
Ukrainians will definitely come. Should we go to Greenland? I don't know, I'm not planning to yet. Although, as a, excursion, visiting that island would be interesting. I really want to. I will definitely do so after the war. Although, honestly, I would start with Iceland. It's also cold and also beautiful there. Oh, you idiot, you're doing a poor job, introducing some parallels that don't really exist. And now the most interesting part. Let's talk about social responsibility. You'll understand what I mean in a moment.
Simply nothing.
Everything is right here, no problems. Why take away an absolutely rotten asset if nearby? Well, there is simply beauty, and then what? Are we Russia's enemy or something? And in what way? We don't wage trade wars. We have no territorial conflicts. Just a sec. And let's get back to the good Trump and, accordingly, the absence of trade wars. This is a wonderful and underrated topic. And what do we have here? Oh, the 7th Russian tanker. It's all been seized. It's a Sahita, I don't know, or Sagita, whichever is the correct pronunciation. It was, accordingly, seized by the United States Defense Forces. This was reported by the United States Southern Command. The seizure of yet another tanker, operating in violation of President Trump's quarantine for sanctioned vessels in the Caribbean, demonstrates our determination to ensure that only legally transported oil leaves Venezuela. The oil was Russian, and the tanker was Russian. What are we talking about? Not a word about it. It's like they've filled their mouths with, and think that if they don't talk about it out loud, no one will know. Let's move on. What a weak position the Russian nations have. But as for Europe, yes, they don't want to give up Greenland. There are still a number of territories there. By the way, the French need to think carefully. Meanwhile, the Dacha residents are acting like little sissies. Why? You've already sold your territory to the Americans. Why are you so stubborn now? But if this is an old, who's been on the streets her whole life, it's a bit late to be pretending to be a virgin. Good idea. Let's talk about this, about defloration. So, the United States has often bought territories in its history, and they've bought something. Mortar called it an empire back then, but still. Whose Alaska is it? Morons. Who's the, here? The answer is obvious. You're playing with parallels, he's on the line. You could be faced with some very harsh conclusions. Soloviev, A. Well, I don't want to go into sexism, but if you use these analogies, then that's how it is. Especially since everything is for sale in Moscow, including the aging propagandists. It's a bit late, comrade Europeans, a bit late. The Americans won't be happy with this. So, say goodbye to Greenland, guys. This isn't a political map of the world. I'm glad you'll learn some new words thanks to me. So say goodbye. And Europe is America's main enemy. You're not a nation state, but a bunch of stupid political leaders who think they can manipulate Trump. And most importantly, the European Union as an institution. Yeah. Sharing power, the approach is perfectly understandable. But listen, they've got some kind of epidemic going on in the Kremlin. So, Yuri Yushakov loves to talk about what Trump said. In general, the Russian comrades, well, together with Kirill Dmitriev and all the other propagandists, are simply pushing one line. What kind of ideal Trump is. But in this picture of an ideal world, I just want to highlight one thing. It's not for nothing that I started this video by saying we bombed Oryol, Belgorod, and, consequently, Krasnodar. Notes from a veteran. The Ukrainian armed forces launched a massive missile strike on Belgorod using the HIMARS MLRS. The air defenses shot everything down. However, there are consequences from the debris falling on Earth. Well, nothing new, I think. I love Belgorod's air defense. That's how it's supposed to sound. But I just want to remind the Russian idiots. Who makes the Mars rockets? Well, they came from somewhere in Ukraine, right? Well, some think it was a gift. If Ramzan Kadyrov were in the studio, he'd say it was all from God. That's also an option. Well, we understand, these are American supplies. Under what conditions are these supplies being delivered to Belgorod? That's no longer a matter of principle. So, guys, keep on kowtowing to the Americans, as you do, and the God-bearing people will definitely appreciate it. That's what they call scum. Personally, I'm more than happy with this arrangement. If we need to help America in a just war against European Nazis, well, we even have a shared tradition of that. The tradition is an allusion to world wars. Everything has changed dramatically in this context. And when the Russians rush to help the Americans seize Greenland, while they themselves are bogged down in a bloodbath in Ukraine, well, what do they look like? Well, just buffoons, yes, clowns. The war began with the idea that Zelensky was a clown, but it turned out that Putin is a clown, only a bloody one. So, what other thoughts are there about Greenland? They are all ambiguous. Let's imagine for a moment. Trump seizes Greenland. Will Europe collapse from that? I seriously doubt it. Yes, it will be unpleasant, yes, it will not be very good, but it will not be fatal. How do you imagine this? You mean Trump will tear Greenland away from Europe? Yes, very much so. I see several options here, Yevgeny. The human mattress is swelling, as is the Russian economy, as is the Russian state. Perhaps they, along with Lukashenko, are taking diet pills, but these pills are affecting the brain. The key point is that Europe won't fall apart. That's already a fact. And I, frankly, believe that a solution will be found and the island of discord will be settled. Where did this idea come from, anyway? It first popped into Trump's head that he wants to be president of the world. No, it doesn't work that way. Opposition to this decision is growing in the US itself. And frankly, the American people as a whole don't support it. This is important because the US is still a democracy, yes, with its own peculiarities, but nevertheless. Option 1. Or, as they want to do, persuade him to agree to some form of shared governance. Yes, he doesn't want it. He's talking about total ownership. First, yes, a condominium, then, naturally, there will be total ownership. Option 2. Trump takes Greenland, the Europeans respond with some tariffs and say, well, let's wait for a Democrat, let's not start a confrontation. A Democrat, when he comes to power, will resume negotiations. Quote, so, it's entirely possible. And it's entirely possible that if a Republican comes to power, there will also be changes and new negotiations. And most importantly, they don't stop even with the current American president. So, what kind of pressure is there? Grab Greenland, do it like Russia did, so that we can talk about Crimea on the international stage and draw parallels with Greenland. There's this drunken idiot here, his name is Dmitry Alkoholovich Medvedev, or maybe he's a demon. He's just musing about how, as he wrote here, the issue of a dead Ukraine and frozen Greenland will be discussed at Davos. Judging by the flights over Russian territory last night, it's still unclear who's dead. By the way, Russians, they might already be in this state while they're still alive. Maybe that's why they're so fond of the final fireworks, aimed at their own heads. Ah, and we call it Putin's last kiss. You know what I mean here. So, Dima writes, cowardly European roosters, sated with tranquilizers out of fear, will convince the pushy uncle, that is, Trump, to accept full guardianship of the island, but leave it in the formal ownership of, well, the Danish kingdom. Do it, uncle, as Medvedev writes, as you wish. Take the island of indefinite free use, blah 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 blah, airfields, missile silos, and any other objects for total control. And there's an interesting comparison here. However, that's not what Trump needs. Everyone understands that he needs to paint the island on the world maps in the stars and stripes. Yeah. And stand alongside the founding fathers. I want to remain forever in history and at the same time become like Putin. An interesting comparison, but even Anatolievich or Alkogolovich say it's impossible. They're talking about some referendums here, but Greenland has never been directly connected to the states. I see there's some kind of rebellion here amidst the general grooming. And the voice of Russia is the voice of Medvedev. Russia, why have you fallen? Seriously. Let's talk about future options. What are they broadcasting in the swamps? In the Eurozone, this will certainly awaken the idea of militarization. Of course, this will strengthen them, which are already rising and awakening. The idea of creating our own large armed forces. Now the focus will be precisely on this. And in whose interests is this? If you want to determine geopolitics, there must be force. Military force, economic and political. Without a military component, it doesn't work. That's it. That's why I say it will take a little time. And many in Europe will say, Donald, you're certainly strange, but, in principle, you've given us quite a boost. For this, by the way, they need, and only they can, to create large armed forces, relying on Germany. They have nothing else, or on the Franco-British alliance, but the French are somehow too weak for that. For now, they can't do without it. And here, by the way, is what the Latvian bankers were talking about a war with Europe, with Russia. Of course, they need Europe, because it's a mobilizing factor against a common enemy. This could justify the creation of their own armed forces. Well, with the enemy, it's generally clear. And why not? And no one on this planet has ever threatened Europe with a nuclear explosion. That's never happened. Really. And only Russian propagandists like Karaganov, Solovyov, and those, are practicing these verbal exercises. So, the story about Europe's weakness, I think, is... well, it's not true. Are Europeans ready to fight? I recently spoke with a professor, a Spaniard, by the way. And when I asked him if Europe was ready for war, he said, not right now. But this is changing very, very quickly, depending on the situation. If the world changes as it is now, then Europeans will be able to easily pull the trigger, and we will teach them. Moreover, the future European army, and this trend is gaining momentum, will be based on experience and, Ukrainian military technology. So, glory to the Ukrainian armed forces. Subscribe to the channel, support our fundraising for 4 brigades. QR code on the screen, details in the description. Let me remind you that these are, well, our 91st 127th Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and the Berevy and Rubbish Brigades of the National Guard. Subscriptions, likes, and comments are all yours. All of this adds up to karma. And, of course, Ukraine was, is, and always will be. See you later. M.